good to see you all again. I'm recording this message with Father's Day very much in my mind. I want to refer to a phrase which is used quite regularly in English today, and it's a phrase that was first coined from something that took place in the Bible. Like many other phrases from the Bible, it's come into common usage. The Bible is actually the source of quite a number of common phrases. Let me give you a few examples. Did you know that the phrases, "the writing is on the wall," "there's nothing new under the sun," "a millstone around your neck," "like a lamb to the slaughter," "by the skin of your teeth," "the blind leading the blind," "being at your wit's end"? They're just a few of many phrases that we use today that come from the Bible. The phrase I want to think about on this Father's Day is prodigal son. It's used as a reference to a story Jesus told to a listening crowd. Jesus quite frequently told fictional stories in order to make a point. It was perhaps a common way of teachers getting their point across. You can actually read the story as Jesus told it, translated into English now, of course, in the New Testament, in the Gospel of Luke, and it's in chapter 15, starting at verse 11. I'm just going to pray, see what happened, and make a couple of points for us today. Remember, this is fictional, and Jesus does not join up all the dots for us. It's the point that he is drawing attention to in the story, not the detail. He says that there was a man who had 2 sons, and one of them, the younger one, decided that he didn't want to wait for his father to die before he had his share of the inheritance. He could do a lot with that share right now, and so, quite rudely, he asked his father to give him his share now, as if he was dead already. We have no information about how the father reacted emotionally to that request. You can maybe think about that yourself. What would you do? But he did what his son asked for. Jesus said very soon the younger son packed his bags and went far away from home, to a different country in fact, as far away as he could be. There he just wasted his money on wild living. Again, you can fill in with your own mind what sort of a life the boy led. But when the money had all gone in the land he was in, it was hit by a very fierce famine. And having no money left to provide for himself, he went and got a job feeding pigs. Jesus doesn't comment on this, but you know what having to feed a pig might imply to a person who was a Jew. Pigs are something that they avoid. But in fact, the famine was so severe that the boy would even have been willing to eat the pig's food. He comes to his senses at last. His thoughts turn to home, and he appreciates what he has lost. Now it seems too much for him to expect to go back and be treated as the younger son again. But he still makes up his mind that he will return, offer his apologies for his bad behaviour, which he recognises is not only against his father but also against God as well. If those apologies are accepted, then he will be willing to take the role of a servant of his father in the house. So he gets up and returns. And this is where the story really becomes relevant to Father's Day. Jesus says that his father sees him coming from a long distance away, and his heart responds with great compassion, and he runs to his son, throws his arms around him and kisses him. The son starts to blurt out his apology and says that he's no longer worthy of being called the son of his father. But his father stops him and calls for the best of everything to be done for his son. Great clothes, a ring on his finger to acknowledge he's part of the family again, and he even puts on a great meal for him. He says, "This is my son who was lost. He's found. I thought he was dead, but he's alive." Before we finish this video, we will think of this point that Jesus was making, the return of those who have walked away from God, who is our Heavenly Father. But let's think firstly on Father's Day about this father in this story. He's a father who is obviously wealthy. He's a father who is willing to give his son his own head, allowing him to do what he chooses. He's a father who gives up a significant amount of his own valuables for his son. He's a father who accepts the fact that his son wants to leave him and live somewhere else. He's a father who misses his son greatly and is very concerned about him. He's a father who is watching out, probably every day, for his son to come back. And as soon as he sees that happening, he forgets about the custom of the day that a man his age would not run, and he goes rushing headlong, welcomes back his wayward son. Having heard the apology the son gives for his own behaviour, the father takes him back, not as a servant, but restored as his own son. He's a generous father because he gives his son the very best. Maybe you know a father who is like that, or maybe you know one who is very different. Jesus is not trying to make any comparison for us with our own natural fathers. What he is doing is outlining for us exactly what God is like. And here's the point of his story. Jesus is pointing out that each of us has behaved like this prodigal son. That's not an action against our own human father that Jesus is talking about, although that could be the case. It's what we've done with God. God has made us and given us so much every day, but we choose, like the son, to take from God what he has given, maybe without even a thank you, and live our lives exactly the way we want to. Just as the father in the story allowed his son to go away, so God allows us to do what we want. Life may seem good to us, but difficult times can come just as they did for this younger son. It was those things that brought him to his senses and made him look to where he could find real help from, his father and home. Maybe you're having a difficult time, and the thought of God, the Heavenly Father, being someone who you can get help from is very appealing. Come back to God and say sorry for leaving him out of your life. Ask him to take you back, not as a servant, but now as a child of God. Maybe you haven't had those difficult times in your life and everything seems fine. That's great, but it doesn't get past the fact that we choose our own way and leave God out, and yet he gives us everything every day that we have. It would make great sense to come back to God and say sorry for leaving him out and ask him to be your father again. And he has so much more to offer you than you currently know. This, of course, is only possible because of what Jesus, God's own Son, did. He left his Father, but it was to come down to do what his Father asked him to do. It was obedience, not selfishness. It took him to die on the cross at Calvary, so that when we say sorry, God can say, I've already punished Jesus for what you did wrong. Come back and be welcomed as my child. That really is a remarkable Father, isn't it? Willing to give his own Son to die so that he would have us back, the ones who have rejected him. Jesus went on in that story to speak about the party that the Father threw for his Son. And he says something remarkable about heaven. He says that every time someone comes back and says sorry and asks for forgiveness from God, then there is great rejoicing in heaven itself. Among the angels there's a heavenly party that takes place. That's remarkable. I'm sure we would all want our own fathers to have been like the father in the story. I'm sure those of us who are fathers wish we'd be more like him and look to be more like him in the future. What matters is that God is waiting for you to come back to him, watching every day, and he's longing with compassion, as it were, to put his arms around you when he runs to meet you and kisses you, accepts your apology and welcomes you back into his household as his child. Nothing is more important on this Father's Day than to think of doing that yourself. The Son came to his senses and returned. Thank you for watching.